Hello and welcome to The Great Equalizer.
And a special episode of TGE Talks Menopause.
We are your hosts, Sam
and Charlene.
And joining us today in person, in front of our first, albeit intimate, live audience, is world-leading dietitian and performance nutritionist, Dr. Linia Patel.
With a BSc in Biochemistry and Physiology from our very own University of Cape Town, Dr. Linia found her groove in Nutrition and Dietetics, adding a master's here in sports nutrition and a PhD there in Public Health and Epidemiology. You know, no biggie.
Look, this is a truly impressive resume and we can't wait to dive into this brain. But truly, what aligns with the heart of what we're doing here at The Great Equalizer is knowing more about Dr. Linia's specialist interest in women's health.
And her passion for the crucial link between food and hormone health.
It's such a privilege to have her right here with us in the heart of what is arguably one of Johannesburg's foodiest suburbs. Welcome, Dr. Linia.
Dr. Linia.
Oh, thank you so much, ladies. I'm so excited to have this conversation.
And you know what? We are within a live audience, so we can give a round of applause, I think.
Yes.
Everybody's being very kind and quiet.
Yes.
Quiet as mice. I don't know if I came across as threatening. But thank you for joining us, to our audience and to Dr. Linia on The Great Equalizer and TGE's current read. We'll get straight into it, I think.
Yes, let's. Yeah. How do the podcasters say? Let's dive right in.
Dive right in. I mean, okay. You have your roots in Zambia and had studied a BSc in Cape Town at UCT, but your path pivoted and you changed your career focus. So I want to know what prompted the kind of shift for you initially.
Well, even just studying nutrition was a shift because I'm born, bred and buttered in Zambia. I'm born to a black Zambian mum and an Indian dad. And I say that because that means that my career options were always just three: doctor, lawyer, engineer. So having a naturally caring posture, I was like, right, I'm going to do medicine. But being Zambian, you actually can't study medicine straight away in South Africa. So I came to do a BSc first with the idea that I would then pivot to do medicine at Wits in my fourth year. And actually, in my second year at university, I was trying to get the best grades I could to give myself that chance to get into medical school. And I started suffering with irritable bowel syndrome. And at that time, I had an aunt who referred me to a doctor who was really holistic in his approach, given this was 20 years ago. And he was like, lady, you need to manage your stress and you need to really get on top of your nutrition. And this was the first time I had ever really thought about my nutrition. And I went all in. I tend to be all or nothing. And I went all in and I, started researching irritable bowel syndrome and how I could change my diet to help my symptoms. And I changed my diet and my symptoms were alleviated. And I kind of thought, wow.
This is like a cheat code.
Exactly. And that's where my passion for nutrition actually began. So I did a pivot from medicine, and that's why I then went and did nutrition and dietetics. And then this whole new world opened up to me. And I had two very strong passions while I was studying at UCT. And one was sports nutrition. And one was public health. They're very, very different. And I wanted to specialize in both. So the beginning of my career was actually in sports.
Okay.
And I went, and the beginning of my career was actually in the UK, and I worked in a sporting environment. So looking after athletes, high-performing individuals, but just in a sporting environment. 5 years after doing that, two of the doctors that I worked with in that high-performance center went off to set up a new performance center, but looking after corporate athletes.
Oh, wow.
So leaders and shakers of banks or consultancy firms or hedge funds who are high-performing individuals but in a different space. Because a lot of the strategies that we used in high-performing sporting environments can be translated into that. And I remember I was probably 28 years old at the time. I got to, my boss at that time said, Linia, you're up. You're going to be looking after a group of 11 and they're leaders of one of the banks.
C-suite individuals.
C-suite individuals.
Goodness,
okay. And I had already had exposure to the fact that you got probably about 30 seconds to impress these guys.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
If that. And I had complete imposter syndrome because I knew, young girl, of color as well, going and telling these individuals what they should be eating.
It's like walking into a lion's den.
Exactly. So I had to do my homework, and I had to do my homework well. Coming from physiology, having done a degree in physiology, my approach always is, when I'm looking after a client, is I need to understand what's going on in their bodies. And so, we did bloods, they had filled out nutrition and health questionnaires, and of the group of 11, there was 3 women leaders. So not enough leaders, but there was 3. One was in her late 30s, one was in her mid 40s, and one was 53. The 53-year-old had written on her questionnaire, postmenopausal. So I was like, ooh, first time I've kind of come across that. And then once I started understanding their physiology, I'm like, okay, so these women are going through the menopause transition. Nutrition for menopause, what is it? Ooh, the course at UCT was really, really good, but they didn't teach me that. And now I had about a month to cram and learn so that I could appear in front of this group with the knowledge that would empower them to look after their bodies. And so I went to Google, like we all do, to see what books I could buy that I could read up. And there was one book at that time in that space. And then I was like, okay, well, I'm a scientist, so let's go to the scientific database, which is called PubMed, where you kind of get the research. There was about 3 scientific articles on nutrition, on menopause and nutrition.
That is wild.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not altogether surprised because I deal with women's health, sexual and reproductive health, and I know that there's a dearth of research and resources in women's health. And I thought it was getting better. Is it getting better?
It is absolutely getting better now.
Well, thanks
but we
to you,
still, but we still have a long way to go. And
Yeah.
they say that from, we need to think about it. Are we doing research in it? It's getting better, but it takes about 20 years from research to be translated into like policy or clinical guidance. So we're like, there's a 20-year lag between that. But at least there's many more books out there about the menopause now.
Right.
And many more celebrities speaking out about it. You see a lot of it. We're in this little echo chamber on social media. So you see many more celebrities talking about it. Oprah Winfrey just had her special.
Menopause special.
Yeah.
So
and
exciting.
with an expert panel and so on. So with it being the hot topic, it's also very dangerous. How do we know what's myth and what's peer-reviewed research? What advice would you give?
It's so hard now with social media, right? Because everybody now is an expert in it. And I would say, obviously look at where, the credentials of the person who's actually speaking. And again, I think I was having this conversation with you before we started recording about the idea that even within my own profession, you have one doctor saying, eat low carb. Then you have another doctor saying, but carbohydrates are good for you. And nutrition is actually never black and white. It's always very, very gray. And it's always very, very specific to you as an individual. So my advice would always be, we have a wealth of knowledge out there, which is fantastic. If you like following one professional, for example, take their advice, but perhaps look and see what other advice is there, and then tune back into you as an individual. We need to take agency of our own health. And the first chapter of my book is Know You. Because the more we know ourselves, the more we know, you know you, the more you can say, well, this works for me, this doesn't work for me. What is right for me from what I'm listening to?
And also, I suppose, realistically, like what's happening in your life at the moment? Like, what is your schedule like? Like, do you have young children? Do you have older children? Are you like single mom? All of those things have an impact on what you're able to do for yourself.
So I'm going to go off script, if you don't mind, Charlene.
No.
She hates it when I go off script, guys.
Only when you put me on the spot with a random question that I'm like in a deer in headlights.
But I think, we can involve our audience a little bit. Because you're mentioning kind of knowing yourself, and there's a part in the introduction, which I hope you don't mind, I've starred and highlighted and lined up, that I'd love for you to read out. I'll hold your mic for you, and it would be so great. If you guys want to read along, now would be the time. It's on page 9. It's divided into 2 columns, and from the bottom of the first column up until the highlighted part. See there, this ties really nicely in. I think it just gives,
So do you want me to read this the whole thing.
From there.
Okay.
It gives great, substance to what Dr. Linia is talking about now, about knowing yourself and about what we face as women from all categories of age groups.
Growing up and aging are inevitable. Gaining weight, being utterly overwhelmed, crippled with anxiety, not sleeping, having below zero libido isn't. Now we understand more about what happens to women's hormones as we age and how best to adapt to these changes and ultimately to thrive. Yes, midlife is full on. Yes, your body is changing. That is the reality, but therein lies the opportunity. There is an upside. Getting older has its perks too. Surveys asking women about the benefits of aging report that most women find that with age, it's easier to speak their mind, they worry less about other people's opinions, and overall, they have clearer priorities. Imagine if we harness the increased emotional and social intelligence, what we call wisdom, and gained health intelligence too. The menopause years are an opportunity to do just that, to get to know yourself. Know yourself so that you can manage your symptoms. Know yourself so that you can be an active participant in determining how you age. Know yourself so that you can stretch and not snap. Know yourself so that you can show up as the best version of you.
I loved reading that, and hence the highlights and the tags and everything. I think, and I love it because we have several age groups present today. Those in menopause, those at the perimenopause stage, those post-childbirth reproductive age, those in their reproductive era, if you will. But I do find that we're operating in silos here. And there's such a gap, there's been a gap in information for me just going from reproductive age to like, who am I now that I'm not having kids? Anymore. I don't want any more babies, but I'm not perimenopausal yet, but something is happening. And I just feel like society has this trajectory where you have kids, you're expected to bounce back, like really quickly and just be happy because you've had kids. And
it's a blessing.
And it's
you're
a blessing.
Blessed, your child's healthy. You're healthy for the most part.
You're in your naughty 40s. You need to be having the best sex of your life, right?
Right.
But then quickly you regress into old age. You shrivel and you die in your redundancy. And we live our lives according to this societal expectation. When we have kids, it's a societal expectation. When we get married and have kids, it's a societal expectation. When we go through menopause, it's a societal expectation. There's a way that this is supposed to look, but it's not the same for everybody. So I want to chat more about that, and I want to chat about stigma. You know, what are we as women? We're all individuals. How do you feel being in this era? Do you feel empowered, or do you feel like you're running uphill?
Well, I want to feel empowered, and that's why I wrote this book, is because unfortunately the menopause has been such a taboo for so long. Our mothers didn't talk about it, our grandmothers didn't talk about it, and as a result, there's so many myths out there linked with it. And also just, I remember when I started writing this book, and I would say to my friends, I'm writing a book on menopause, and they'll be like, oh, can't you write it on something,
Sexy,
more sexy,
yeah.
Exactly. And I was like, girls, no.
Yes.
No.
This is us owning it.
This is us owning it. And I love the fact that in Japan, the word for menopause, I'm not going to say it because my Japanese is terrible, but it means spring, second spring.
I love that.
And the Japanese culture is so good at really appreciating, acknowledging the beauty of wisdom and aging and the value of that. And I love the fact that they look at this saying, hey, yes, you have to learn how your body's working again in a different way, but use that as an opportunity to really, I suppose, thrive and make your second half the best half.
I want to also say something that stood out for me when I started reading this was just the positive tone that you communicate with in this book. It makes me feel hopeful because I'm just entering perimenopause now, and I'm in that up and down roller coaster stage of it where I'm doing bloods and still trying to figure it out. And we spoke about this a little bit off mic before we started recording, but I often have to rip myself out of this. It's not all doom and gloom, Charlene. It is going to be okay. And my husband's being very supportive of it at the moment, and he's not just ignoring it. He's reading up about it, and he's showing an interest, and he's talking to me about how I'm feeling. So I'm very grateful that I have a very supportive partner in that sense. Most women don't necessarily have that. And he's reading all of this stuff, and he's just like, have we just sailed through the best years of our life and not realized it? And this is just downhill from here. And so
Your husband's ever an optimist, isn't he?
He's very supportive, but my gosh, he can have doomsday thinking. But anyway, what I wanted to say was it gives me hope. And just the fact that you emphasize it, look at it as an opportunity to harness what you know.
Yeah, there is hope, and that's the performance nutritionist hat on coming in there. But I also, when I was writing this book, the title for me, I didn't necessarily want to put menopause there, because I wrote this book for women going through the menopause transition, experiencing symptoms, to help them realize that they're not going crazy, that their hormones are a huge part of it, and they could do something to manage their symptoms. But I also wrote this book for my 37-year-olds, my 38-year-olds who are not even necessarily thinking about the menopause transition. Because again, if I put my public health hat on, public health is all about prevention, being proactive, getting ahead of the curve. And the research shows that if you have a healthier lifestyle as you go through this menopause transition, that the intensity and the severity of the symptoms will be much better.
It's what you do today. You're investing in your own future. It's what you do today that'll count tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yes.
We were actually talking again off mic of how Charlene, she doesn't look it, but she's 5 years older than me.
Oh, he's so sweet. Keep it coming, please. Don't stop.
And it was when we first started our podcast that she would be, lamenting, I guess, about how she just did not feel herself. And I couldn't quite relate. I was pregnant one of the years. I was newly postpartum another one of the years. And I was just like, that really sounded like it sucks. And it sounded like she just had a different kind of cycle to me until I hit 38. And I was like, I get it now. And so exactly that preventative healthcare, I'm privileged enough to have a friend who I can talk to. And we're open enough about our cycles and about our fears and about what we're experiencing beyond just bleeding, guys. It's weight gain, it's depression, it's libido.
It's like feeling like you're going mad, and you think that you need to just be constantly in a psychologist's office because you feel like a lunatic.
And you know what kills me is we're looking at food for menopause. But for me, the first thing that comes to mind, and not personally, because I do try to fight the stigma, but when people talk about food, it's always to do with weight gain and weight loss. It's always about cutting fat and looking the best way that you can. It's about the external.
A calorie budget, calories in, calories out. What are you burning versus...
I mean, we talk about it all the time. We talk about our fupas. Everybody know what a fupa is?
Fupa?
No.
Can I demonstrate? Let me know. It's the little kangaroo pouch that you have usually after you've had a C-section.
Yeah, it's a terrible term that women have for each other, which stands for fat upper pubic area, right?
Yes, yeah. A fupa. It's very sexy.
It's horrible. Women are awful
We should
to
be kinder
ourselves.
to ourselves.
Yeah, and we talk about it, and we're pro,
And you also
positive
say in your
speak.
book, treat yourself like a best friend.
Yeah.
Like you treat your best friend.
No, we will be doing better.
Yes.
But we do see this. We see this among women. I see women on, like, influencers on terribly calorie restrictive diets. And it's not about, okay, you are seeing a little bit of like strong over skinny.
That's becoming more now. Only none
only
recently
now.
Where strong over skinny is the thing.
You're still seeing like a really, the negative body image being perpetuated. And that skinny versus strong mindset as opposed to the inverse. And so how are you changing that with focusing on food?
Well, I think you've raised two things that I want to unpack. The first is the idea that this hormonal flux, so the perimenopause is so actually maybe I can do a little bit of definitions.
Please,
because I think sometimes we don't really understand what's going on. So the menopause is actually one day. the medical definition for the menopause is when a woman has not had a menstrual cycle for a consecutive 12 months and 1 day. So after that menopause, you go into postmenopause. But what happens before then is the perimenopause. And so peri is a Greek word which means around, so around the menopause. And that perimenopause can be anything from 4 years to 14 years. Okay? And that perimenopause is when we experience all these symptoms that we feel cray-cray or libido or the weight gain. And that's because you have this hormonal flux, roller coaster of the hormones, one day being high and one day being low. Now, we cannot diagnose perimenopause with bloods. So when a doctor asks for bloods, what they're doing is they're looking at other markers that then they can say, well, you don't have thyroid issues, you don't have blood sugar levels. They're not necessarily diagnosing you with perimenopause. So what you need to do is know your symptoms.
Yes.
Because your symptoms are the telltale sign of whether you're going through the perimenopause transition. Now, that hormonal roller coaster is already stressful for the body. So there's this classic study where they're looking at a group of 1,000 women who are some in their 30s, some in their 40s, some in their 50s. And when they test the amount of cortisol, which is a stress hormone in their bloods, women in the perimenopause transition in their 40s have a higher baseline stress levels. So if this is physiologically a stressful period, you have to be kind to yourself. So going through this deprivation in your approach to nutrition ain't going to work. It's a time to nourish your body from a nutritional point of view, but also emotionally. And that's why it's called Food for Menopause. But I bring in all the pillars of well-being into this book. Because if you came to see me in my clinical practice, of course I'm going to ask you what you ate for dinner last night and are you drinking enough water? But I also ask you, how did you sleep last night, Charlene? You know, how are you moving? What's going on in your mind, Sam? Because all of those things have an impact on what you put on your plate. And so the pillars of well-being are nutrition is one, movement is one, mental well-being is one, and sleep is a foundation. And in that, the mental well-being space, for me, is where body image comes in. And very often we have that voice in our heads that is the voice that we listen to the most in our lives. And so we proactively need to make sure that that voice in our heads is the voice that we speak to our best friends with. You know, very often the things we say to ourselves in our heads, we would never say to our best friends, would we?
No.
And so for me, that's a part of self-care that manages your emotional well-being, that helps calm your nervous system, which ironically helps me as a clinician, as a dietitian, get healthier food on your plate.
Yeah, when I read that, it was like all the pennies they were just dropping in my mind when you speak about like cravings. And if I have to go back and I had to journal it, you would be able to do a very consistent graph with I slept poorly, the next day I binge ate because and then the fact that I found out I was estrogen dominant plays into those cravings, and then the guilt comes in because why did I binge? And I'm already starting to gain weight, and then you probably ate too many sugary things, so you're on a spike, and then you dip, you have no energy, you don't want to go to the gym, so you don't move your body, and it's just this vicious cycle that you fall into. And it seems so obvious, but sleep is so...
Oh, I haven't gotten enough sleep for the past 10 years, but probably like the last 2 nights has been particularly bad. And you could mainline coffee into me right now. It wouldn't be enough.
And the problem is you take the coffee to get through...
It's not working, but I do it anyways.
And now also you're kind of addicted to the caffeine because you're consuming it constantly.
And I'm not sleeping properly as a result.
Initially you start drinking the coffee to just help wake you up, and then it's a vicious circle that just keeps perpetuating itself. And I mean, somewhere it's got to stop.
Yeah, we need to do better.
Sam and I always joke, and this is maybe a little bit of a rough one, but we always say that we drink coffee because cocaine's illegal. It's not true. I've never used cocaine, but honestly, that it's the only option you have when you're in those sleep-deprived stages.
We're so on the go. So, I mean, I want to talk a little bit about treatment for menopause and perimenopause without going into the pill and HRT, which you do go into the book, you speak about different hormones and the role of that. But your book is all about what food brings to the table. Mind the pun.
Yeah. No, brilliant.
But let's talk about sexual health and food. We hear so much about what to eat or not to eat, what you need to restrict when you're pregnant or lactating. But our needs totally fall by the wayside once we're done having kids.
Yeah,
And
nobody once the baby's out, it's just about what is the baby
What is the baby eating?
Yes.
Do you have an air fryer?
Do you have an air fryer? No more fried foods.
So what should women post-reproductive age be eating? I mean, this is what your whole book is about. So let's not summarize it, but the basic tenets.
So I will say, so I have 4 pillars in the book. The first one is hydration. And it's one that people get so wrong. You know, most people actually go through life mildly dehydrated, and your body is 75% water. And, you know, at the beginning of that chapter, I talk about the fact that, you know, if I said to you, brain fog, lack of concentration, fatigue, constipation, weight gain, those sound like maybe some of the symptoms we were talking about in terms of the perimenopause, but they're also something you would experience if you're mildly dehydrated, which is the point at which I'm thirsty. So very often my job as a clinician is to unpick what's going on. And so I have to try and get the basics right first to see whether it is actually hydration or hormones. You know, so the first pillar is hydrate. And I get pushback with hydration because I get told, I don't want to be in the toilet all the time, Linia.
For real?
Then you need to train your bladder.
Like time poor people that are saying that?
Yeah. But then you need to train, a lot of it is that you need to train your bladder. And I'm sure all of us would have had this experience where we think we need to go to the bathroom, but then an email comes in or a phone call comes in and we get distracted, we continue working, and then suddenly we're bursting to go to the toilet. So if you always give in to your bladder at the first filling, you start getting a lazy bladder. So when it's about waiting until your bladder is full and then going to the toilet. So when you go pee, you should be looking at how long you're peeing for, the color of your pee. Pale straw is better because that shows you're hydrated. And maybe also linking into how it smells, because if you're well hydrated, it shouldn't have such a strong smell. So hydration. The second is managing your blood sugar levels. So that doesn't mean that I need to get all fancy and go buy devices that measure my blood sugar levels. It actually means that I need to make balanced eating sexy. You know, back to the half the plate vegetables, a little bit like quarter plate protein, quarter plate carbs, and some fat. Now, what happens with a woman as she goes through the perimenopause transition is that the one nutrient that she can't metabolize as well is carbs. So if she had eaten a plate of pasta pesto in her early 30s, the same plate of pasta pesto would have a slightly different effect in her 40s. Now, that doesn't mean we need to go low carb. We just need to become cleverer with the type of carbohydrates we're eating, whole grain, slow release into the body, low GI, and the timing.
Yes.
So breakfast and lunch is when to do it. Pasta for dinner, maybe not such a good idea. Okay? So hydration, blood sugars. The third is where there is some research now. And, you know, what I was able to add into the book is that women also going through the perimenopause transition just suffer with more inflammation. This is what makes their kind of everything feel worse. Their brain fog, aches and pains.
Can I add hangovers? How much worse is your hangover later?
Yes.
Because your liver is not as efficient. Yeah, absolutely. That too.
So bad.
It's very true. It's gotten to the point where it's just the juice is not worth the squeeze for me anymore. I cannot consume alcohol because it might be briefly fun while I'm having this one glass or the second glass, but I immediately regret it. I get indigestion, I get terrible headaches, not even hangover yet. And then I'm like 2 or 3 days afterwards, I feel inflamed, I feel uncomfortable, I don't feel well, I don't sleep well, I get this like anxious feeling for days afterwards. It's really not worth it for me anymore.
So sorry to interrupt. What are we doing about inflammation?
What are we doing about inflammation? We are eating a diet that is very colorful. so that it has got the variety.
Anti-inflammatory foods. Yeah.
Anti-inflammatory foods. So the classic diet is the Mediterranean style diet. And this is again where I'd love there to be African-specific research, because sometimes I always get told, well, Mediterranean diet works in kind of, Europe, but bring it to the African context.
Yeah.
And that basically just means whole foods, whole grains, colorful. So if you're always the type of person that eats an apple and a banana, you need to stop and mix it up a bit. So eating in season, what the Mediterranean countries do very well is they're very, very seasonal with their eating. So herbs and spices, seasonal eating, all of that is basically anti-inflammatory. And then the last one, and you cued me in very nicely with the alcohol, is eat for your gut bacteria. So in the last 10 years, the world of nutrition has focused on gut bacteria or your gut health. And that's because in our intestines, in our large intestine, is a whole world of bacteria that basically govern not just how we digest food, but our immune system, our hormones, our risk of diseases. So when we eat, we need to think not just what am I eating for me, but what am I eating to feed my gut bugs? And they don't like alcohol. Alcohol annihilates the good and bad bacteria. But again, it's about balance. I love a glass of bubbles myself, or a glass of wine. But then perhaps if I do that one night, the next night I'm on my BioLive yogurt or my kefir or my fermented foods to make sure that I'm taking
You're
in
balancing
more.
it.
Exactly. And that's what this nutrition dance is about finding that balance. So living, because, you've got to live, and the part of eating is joy.
That's true, and I think I've certainly grown up with like diet in the diet culture era where abstinence is this constant thing, and it's not about that. It's about balance.
Yeah, cutting yourself off. Not allowing
like
this.
having it like an 80-20. It's what you do 80% of the time that determines where you'll be or how you'll feel, as opposed to the 20%.
Absolutely.
Life is for living.
Yeah, and so you'll be happy to know I've got cake in here. But I also do have a whole chapter on drinks, because alcohol is something that I find a lot of the women that I work with, they'll be like, they're super stressed, they're using alcohol to perhaps self-soothe, or perhaps they're entertaining clients and they're saying, well, Linia, I'm like a loser standing there with my glass of water and lemon. Give me some other options of what I could have, And Diet Coke, for example, because there's artificial sweeteners in there, that is actually also not good for your gut bacteria if it's taken in a habitual way. So, I actually have a whole section on drinks that are nourishing. So like there's a green tea lemonade. So you're on caffeine, I'm going to get you, Sam, onto green tea, because green tea gives you the wiring of caffeine without the feeling like you're dropping afterwards. And then I've got a recipe in there, which is my grandmother's recipe. So my grandmother had a pineapple farm. So I'm in the part of Zambia that grows the best pineapples in the world. And Granny Sarah was ahead of her time, because we would eat the pineapple and then she would keep the skins and she would boil the skins up with turmeric, and she would give that to us as a tonic when we were sick. So we were all like, ugh. But actually now I've kind of redone it, and it's the most delicious kind of like liquid gold, I call it, that is so nourishing. And actually there's stuff in the pineapple skin, bromelain, which helps in terms of digestion as well.
Oh, that's good to know. I've often mixed turmeric into drinks and food and teas, but I didn't know about the pineapple.
So I've got loads of drinks in here that you can use for all your braais.
Oh, yay.
I love that.
Refreshing summer drinks. So let's talk convenience foods, okay? So Sam mentioned that it's not always women generally tend to not feed themselves properly, especially if they're busy and on the go and so on. What would you recommend for women on the go to focus on as far as convenience foods are concerned? Because it's a tricky one.
It's so tricky. And it depends where a woman is in her journey. I'm very much around, my philosophy is, what can you add in? I think if you put pressure for everybody to be this like home goddess who's making everything from scratch, it's just completely unrealistic, right? So I would say, if you've got a convenience food, what can you add to level that up? Where can you get the vegetables in to level that meal up?
Yeah.
So I'm very much around, you keep with the convenience, but what can you add to balance it out a bit better? And one of the big ones is fiber. in general, we don't eat enough fiber. And so that would be your whole grains, for example. So if you've got, I don't know, if you're choosing a meal, wherever possible, go for something that is whole grain, because at least that adds fiber. Or beans and lentils, more beans and lentils. We've got to do that. I've got a recipe in here where I've used chickpeas in the cookies. Because I'm just like trying to get as much fiber in there as possible. So beans and lentils, another way of getting fiber, or fruit and vegetables. Again, making them colorful. So as much of those as you can get in, I would just say, if it means that as a first stepping stone, you can continue with your convenience foods, but you're adding in more fiber, that's a move in the right direction. Then I'd kind of be saying, okay, well, from the convenience foods, which choices can you make that kind of look like the plate that that is half veggies, quarter in terms of protein and carbs?
I do try and do that. We've got a really nice food retailer here that kind of manages that quite well. They've got these like shake it bowls. And so when I am on the go and I need to get something, rather than choosing a ham and cheese salmi, I'll get one of those bowls and check, okay, it's got broccoli, it's got Asian slaw, it's got barley, it's got quinoa. It looks like it's very colorful. This is going to be the one.
Can I add something there?
That's what I try and do.
But this is where commercialism is because the thing that costs money is protein. Why do you go to a restaurant and they give you free bread? They don't give you free steak.
For sure.
Carbs are cheaper than protein. So I love the fact that you're going for that bowl. But I'd be very curious if you picked up the label to see whether that bowl had between 20 to 30 grams of protein. Because very often, sometimes they don't. So what I'd be saying in terms of convenience is maybe have a starter, which is carrots and hummus, which tops up your protein so that you're getting your 20 to 30 grams. Or how can you top up that protein? Maybe you could have a Greek yogurt with some fruit compote as a dessert afterwards to get your protein.
And that gives you something
exactly.
sweet.
Exactly.
And
So read your labels.
You don't tend to think of hummus as a protein.
No, you don't.
Because it's like a swear word in diet culture because
it's
of
a carb,
calories.
It's calories,
Calories,
yes.
So I'm very much around, one of the feedback I got about this was, why did you not put calorie counting for every recipe? And the women I work with have a lot going on in their lives. And to add then calories to everything is just not a message that I wanted to get across. And very often, if you just get the overall balance right, I promise you the calories fall into place. So I'm very much like, yes, don't eat a whole tub of hummus. That's going to give you too many calories. But if you're having hummus as a vehicle for eating more vegetables or to make that meal more delicious, go for it.
I love that. I love that. What about protein? This is a hot topic online. I don't know if anybody else, if it's part of your like echo chamber, but everybody's on with the protein. There's like a prescribed amount of protein that you need. Firstly, do we really need that much? What about the whole plant-based lifestyle that we were gunning for like 5 years ago? We were all just like, let's be kind to the environment, less meat. Now it's like more meat, I don't know where to look.
Yeah. So again, two stories going on here. So we absolutely need, and protein is an important macronutrient for us because as we have less estrogen and less testosterone, naturally we lose muscle mass. And that's not what we want to be doing from our metabolic point of view, because muscle is more metabolically active than fat. So it just means that I burn more calories as you're sitting. But also in terms of longevity, my darling mother had a stroke. So I saw what something like a stroke, the impact that has on quality of life. And if you want to have a good quality of life as you get older, you need to protect your muscle mass, because it means that I'll be the granny that is able to stand up from my chair. Because I'll have the muscle rather than I don't have the muscle to be able to do it. So how do you protect your muscles? You eat enough protein and you do resistance exercise. The two work together. So now more is never better in nutrition. Okay, it's about finding that sweet spot. So I would probably say in terms of, and again, this is me getting into numbers just to give you some context. So 1 gram per kilogram of your body weight of protein is probably a good place to begin. That might not mean much to you, but very often in these circles where it's about high protein, they're going all the way up to 2 grams. And then from your gut bacteria point of view, they don't like too much protein. So this is where the plant-based food is actually good. So it's a combination of everything. So find a sweet spot for protein, and I'll probably be saying just make sure you have some protein at every single meal or snack. You don't have to have a whole Nando's chicken. A quarter of a chicken is more than enough, okay? But then the plant-based eating comes in, absolutely. If we ate more plants, we would be healthier. That doesn't mean we have to go vegan. It just means that half of our plates needs to be plants. And then we can also look for foods that have protein and
I was just going to say,
fiber.
there's some really nice
like lentils.
plants.
I come back to lentils and chickpeas.
that have protein in them. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I have one last question before we throw it out to our audience, and that's supplements. We spoke a little bit about it earlier. I don't get enough protein in, and so I do fall back to the protein shake, which I also know I need to get it in via food. But again, the convenience thing. At the same time, I'm seeing a lot on collagen, creatine. You mentioned probiotics a lot, amino acids, magnesium, B vitamins. You mentioned vitamin D. I was like, iron. I'm on an iron supplement. And I mean, if we had to go around the table, we would probably have a pharmacy by the time we got back to you, Dr. Linia.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about supplements?
So I do have a section in there about supplements as well. So I'm a dietitian, so food first all the way, because we can never really isolate the vitamins into a supplement unless it's a food supplement. And there's some power in terms of how that vitamin is in the food. However, we need to be convenient. And the fact that we're living these lifestyles that are very frenetic means our requirements might be going up and we're not able to get the proteins or the right nutrients in. So there's definitely certain supplements that have a role. Now, the supplement world is unregulated. So this is where there is so much noise. And honestly, I had a client who came to see me with 45 supplements. She was taking 45. And I can understand that because she's feeling so rubbish. And these supplements market themselves to being these magic bullets. So I get it. So I'm very much around, again, stepping back and going simple. So I would say the core ones for me, where there is research, would be, I would love each of you ladies to get your vitamin D levels checked. This is sunny Joburg here, but you would be surprised how many of you will probably have suboptimal vitamin D levels. And vitamin D has huge roles, not just in hormone regulation, but in mood and risk of diseases. So it's a good one to get on top of, okay? The next one will probably be omega-3, which comes from oily fish or chia or flax seeds or pumpkin seeds. Now, why? Because omega-3 is anti-inflammatory. One of the things I said that's going on in your body is making sure that you get, your inflammation levels down. So if you eat fish regularly, you're good. If you don't eat fish, then you need to be getting those pumpkin seeds and the seaweeds in your diet every single day. Or perhaps that's the role of a supplement. Then there are other ones like you've mentioned. So B vitamins are really good with mood. They're water soluble. So I don't need to do blood tests for them. So if I just take a methylated B complex, it might help my energy, it might help my mood, which is very often what women come to see me about. They come to see me because they're exhausted and their mind, they feel like they're going crazy in their minds and they've gained weight and their guts are not doing what they used to do, okay? And then things like protein. Again, I would be wanting you to try get it from food, but I totally get that it's sometimes not convenient. Then I'll be saying, then don't just make up your protein powder with water or plant-based milk. Add some berries in there. What can you add? Add some flax seeds. Chia seeds, so that you're making it a food-based supplement, and the protein is like just an addition. Creatine is one of the most researched supplements out there, and really interesting because when I was a sports, when I first graduated at UCT, creatine, I would only recommend it to my athletes who are doing sprinting and the people who are doing heavy weights. And the research in the last probably 10 years has moved to the effects that it has in terms of us women, particularly in cognitive function. And interestingly enough, women have lower creatine levels than men. Maybe because they eat less meat, but also because estrogen decreasing means that we're not able to kind of make it like we used to. So that's perhaps why we see a real profound effect when women kind of take it. But if you do take creatine, make sure you stay well hydrated, and more is not better. Stick with your 5 grams a day. Collagen.
Yes.
So collagen is an interesting one. The research with collagen is very much still biased to the companies that produce it.
Yes.
So perhaps that might have bias in terms of how we interpret the results. But what would you be using collagen for would be women that are suffering with joint aches and pains, because it's shown to be effective for that. But with collagen, once you start taking it, for it to be effective, you've got to keep taking it forever. So if your wallet allows for it, go for it, because it's not a cheap supplement. So, but it's probably effective in terms of overall, But then you have some cultures where, if when I eat the chicken wing, I eat, the cartilage off the chicken wings. I'm getting my collagen in there, So there's some cultures perhaps where they don't need the collagen because they're getting it naturally in their food. And then some cultures where perhaps they're just eating the chicken breast and that they're not necessarily eating the collagen. And maybe that's where you need to supplement with it.
Interesting. I never thought about that actually.
Yeah.
And how different cultures would ingest.
And I wonder whether, in
differently.
Southeast Asia, look at their skin, look at their general well-being, and they bring in a lot of this collagen and soy-based foods, which is why we think that they don't go through this menopause transition in suffering as much.
Bone broth.
Yes.
Yes.
Miso soup.
So I've recently had a very interesting conversation with someone specifically about collagen, and it was on a WhatsApp group, and these women were saying that I worked for a company who manufactured collagen, and it was literally bones and animal hide, and it's very gross, and I cannot bring myself to consume collagen. And so the other one was saying, I just try to consume bone broth.
Yeah.
I make up a bone broth and I have it as regularly as I can, at least one cup a day.
Yeah.
And that's how she gets her collagen in.
Interesting. I
Yes.
love that we're having these discussions, and I want to throw it out to our intimate audience. Thank you guys for being so quiet and laughing at all the right moments.
As though you've been on cue to laugh when it's time to laugh.
Does anybody have a question? Please introduce yourself as well. We want to know your name. We want to know your story, jacket size, everything.
Hi, everyone. My name is Zwanga. I have a question. So I'm so glad I came here today because I'm in my late 30s and I would like to get started because everybody I know who's going through menopause is having a horrible time. So if I can get a head start, that would be great. So I have a family. And if I am adopting this diet, is it a diet that my whole family can adopt? My son, my 6-year-old son, my husband, and everybody else who comes to my house, can we all eat this food?
Fantastic question. And I want to pick on one point where I love that you're being proactive about it. And I'd also love to highlight that, what we're seeing also is different races and ethnicities go through the menopause transition at different times and experience slightly different symptoms and severity of symptoms. We don't have enough research. I would love there to be a hell of a lot more research. But brown and black women go through the perimenopause transition earlier, and their symptoms are more severe. We don't know why. We think it might be linked with stress and also just lifestyle in general, because we're not, we don't exercise as much, or we don't necessarily go to the gym, and that might have an impact. So we need to take even more care, ladies, if you are of color, because the transition is even harder. But absolutely, this book is for the whole family. There's no ways I want you to be cooking one meal for your kids, one meal for you, one meal for your husband. Life is far too short for that. And I work with women who are time poor. So if I give them recipes where they're just like, number one, I don't have the ingredients at home. And number two, it sounds like too much of a faff. I'm not going to do it. For me, I always try and give advice that is stickable. Is that a word? Stickability. And stickability comes with doable. So I am also myself, time poor. I actually live in Milan and I work in London. When I arrive at home, I want a meal there to be cooked that's easy so that tomorrow I'm back on it. And that means that all the recipes in here are easy, but all the recipes, where perhaps I've given you carbs, I'm saying to you, eat less carbs in the evening, I've just put a tip and said, for your family, serve them sweet potato wedges on page 94. So you can kind of mix and match all the meals. But absolutely, this is a way of eating for the whole family.
I love that. Karen Lane, yes.
The one thing I wanted to ask you, because as we discussed, it's been such a topic that everyone's talking about, is gut health. And I wanted to ask you if you feel like we should be doing more. It sounds quite alternative, things like kimchi, and it's not something that is a natural, it isn't something that we really look for every day now, it's not in our fridge. Or tell me what you think the easiest ways of getting these really gut health, obviously yogurt is a nice, easy one. That's one that we all have. But, kefir and things, it's not something that's like a regular on our...
Especially not in South
list.
Africa,
No.
not in
Yeah.
this country. It's not like you see in Australia, New Zealand, and it's the thing, and everybody's making these recipes. But it's not I don't know if it's a cultural thing or if it's just hard to come by.
Preserving, or, we're not doing it.
100%.
Yeah.
What would you suggest?
So with gut health, we need to think of two things. So there's something called probiotics, which are actually the bacteria. And we find probiotics in foods like the fermented foods. And I would say stick with the one that you know, yogurt. If that's the food that works for you, then use that. But the key is that you have to try and get it in every single day.
Okay.
So for me, I would probably say the one I would be sticking to would be yogurt as well, because that's something that I would be having for breakfast or as a snack.
Okay, so it's not necessarily about quantity, it's about consistency.
Consistency.
Okay.
With nutrition, it's always consistency. So that's the probiotic bit. And in cultures like, even I've just been to Zambia, traditionally, we actually have a fermented milk drink. So you go back to traditional lassi, for example, in Indian cultures, go back to traditional way, because most traditional diets do have some fermented things coming in there, okay? Then the second bit is prebiotics, which is food for my probiotics. And that food, so prebiotics comes in anything that is high fiber or anything that is colorful.
Okay.
And so I would be basically going back to the idea that, whenever you have your breakfast, look and see, are you eating the rainbow in that meal? So you don't have to go all fancy about it. Just keep it basic, because that's the key for me. And I just probably add that probiotic supplements, unfortunately, marketed that you should be taking them every day and they're amazing. But actually what we're seeing now in the research is that a probiotic supplement should only be taken at a specific time for a specific reason. So coming from Cape Town, an analogy that I love to give is that think of Kirstenbosch, all the different species in Kirstenbosch of plants. That's how your gut bacteria are like. And you almost need to give them prebiotics, which are like the fertilizer that feed each species. So if you're always eating the same thing, if you're having jungle oats for breakfast all the time,
Oh, it's going to...
you're only feeding that one population. That population is going to grow, but all the other more slightly exotic ones might not be growing.
Okay.
So then if I do have jungle oats, how can I mix up the seeds I add in there, or perhaps the fruit I'm adding in there, to make sure that I'm getting the variety? Yeah. And if you are taking a supplement, you might want to take it, for example, if you be on an antibiotic, or perhaps if you've got a UTI for a period of time, but not taking it every day. Because again, you'd be feeding one population and that will cause an imbalance with the others.
Right. What about apple cider vinegar?
Oh. So I don't know if you've seen the Glucose Goddess. She's an influencer who swears by apple cider vinegar before you eat to help your blood sugar levels. There definitely is something in the acetic acid in the vinegar that helps dampen the effect of the meal. But dentists would kill you if you had a shot of that every single day, because it's not good for you.
And what about a capsule?
No, I would say put apple cider vinegar in your salad.
Oh, right, as a salad dressing.
Let's do things, exactly. So perhaps have that as a dressing, but let's not be taking shots of stuff.
Because you get little capsules now as well.
Or perhaps if you are eating your cake, eat your cake and enjoy it. And just don't have cake every day.
Uh-huh.
We've got another question here.
Hi, my name is Kaunda, but everyone calls me Kay. My first comment is how easy a lot of the recipes I'm looking at them in here are. It's not things that are too far of a departure from what people eat every day. And I think that's what makes it easier to adopt, when you don't feel daunted by the task of preparing some of these foods. And then I've also seen a lot of... like the turmeric on the spicy butternut or the Indian style roasted sea bass. I know in that diet, a lot of these spices are used for natural, like to help with ailments and to treat things. Do you have any plans maybe to build on this book with more African recipes, like you said, traveling back home to Zambia, which is a very vegetable-rich diet that they have there? Do you have any plans to maybe explore some of that and how it can be incorporated into our diets?
I would absolutely love to do that. And I'm very, very aware, right? So the recipes in this book, so my mum had a restaurant growing up. And so she had ahead of her time, she had a Zambian Indian fusion restaurant.
Oh, wow.
So I kind of grew up with like traditional Zambian food one side, and then in the middle was like Zambian vegetables curried for my father. And then the other side, hardcore Indian food, you know? And so in the recipes, I've brought her recipes in here as well and just use those. But and also I've just had the privilege of living in a number of different countries and experiencing different foods from different cultures. And so along that journey, because I absolutely love food, I've picked up recipes and added them to this book. But I did put some Zambian recipes like your peanut butter cabbage and things like that, but they didn't get published. Because also, you know, it's I suppose it's more catering to the kind of the Western diet. I am so passionate about getting African-specific research and African-specific resources. The issue is that we don't have enough research because not enough research or funding is being done. And we're also sometimes, particularly women of color, not very good at putting our hands up and getting involved so that researchers like myself can get information. So it's a twofold thing. Whenever you see crazy researchers wanting you to participate, particularly when it comes to women's health, please volunteer. Please volunteer, because it really, really makes a difference. And absolutely would love to do a Food for Menopause African version. So Jonathan Ball publishes.
Maybe putting it out into the universe.
Putting it out as an intention into the universe.
We've got another question here, and I think then we're going to have to wrap up unless there is a burning question. Then I might just give you some grace. One more here from Mpumi.
Hi, Dr. Linia. Thank you so much. I just want to highlight that your recipe on page 148, anti-inflammatory carrot and ginger soup, is thebombdiggity.com. Yeah, I have a lot of inflammatory issues, and my doctor and I decided to rather eliminate foods in order for me to be well, and that's really what healed me. So I barely take medication, and I survive off foods like this. Like vitamin C is really bad for me, so I can't have any citrus. So I have to consume a lot of carrots. And yeah, this recipe is just amazing. So thank you.
Oh, amazing. And that just shows the power of food. Food is medicine. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
So Dr. Linia, we've got a room full of publishers, journalists, members of the media, podcasters. What can we do to help further this message around women's health, menopause, and how it bleeds into public health?
Aside from obviously buying your book and giving it as gifts to everyone.
Yes, 100%.
Well, I mean, I think that continuing conversations like this, you guys with the platforms you have, you know, breaking the taboo with conversations that we wouldn't even take to girls' night, you know, is fantastic, because a lot of the time as women, we think sometimes it only happens to us. But a lot of the time, it's things that we just don't talk about that we need to be talking about. So I would just love that this brilliant conversation that we've had here is just taken from these four walls into our lives. So we almost become like, sometimes I'm like my Uber driver here. I was telling him you know, I literally just spreading it, you know, have the conversations with men as well, particularly men. You know, because they all have women in their lives. The more we can do that, the better. And then what I would love for you as individuals, all of you, is know you and look after you. And that for me would be, if you do that, if you nourish yourself, not just nutritionally, but your inner you, then for me, then that's where the thriving, the hashtag living your best life actually goes. And so this book for me is actually more a reminder that, ladies, we put ourselves bottom of that list. I want you to take yourself from the bottom and put yourself at the top. And know you so that you know how you top up your tank. Know you so when you know when you're running on empty. Know you so that you know what are your energy drainers and what are your energy toppers. Because the more you know you, the more all of this fits into place, and the more that you live your own kind of purpose-driven life in the way that you were made to live.
That is a great message to take away. Thank you so much.
No, thank you.
Snaps for our audience. Let's give you guys some snaps.
Thank you.
And a beautiful round of applause for Dr. Linia.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us in this room
Yes.
in Johannesburg and on
On the Great Equalizer.
the Great Equalizer.
Thank you so much. It's just been absolutely fabulous.